The day I found my clothes thrown carelessly in the garage was the day I realized I had been erased from my own home. Not unwanted, not unneeded, erased. My son-in-law looked me in the eyes and said I was taking up space. He said it as if I were dust, as if the years I spent building that very home meant nothing. But what he didn't know is that quiet people aren't helpless. Quiet is just another word for patient. And dignity always finds its way back. So this is the story of how I lost my place. And if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or treated like you didn't matter, this story is for you. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and stay till the end, because trust me, the ending is worth it. My name is Margaret, and I have lived in the same house for 42 years. When people look at it now, they see a modest, two-story home with faded shutters and creaking steps. But to me, it is a memory stitched together with love, laughter, and the soft, familiar rhythm of everyday life. I was married to a man named Daniel. He was a kind man, a quiet man, but one with a presence that filled a room without ever raising his voice. He had the kind of hands that could fix anything: broken furniture, broken fences, even broken spirits. He worked as a carpenter, and he used to say wood had a soul if you listened closely enough. We didn't have riches, but what we lacked in wealth, we made up for in warmth. We had one daughter, Elaine, our miracle child, our joy. She had my face and her father's smile. When she was young, she used to follow Daniel around the workshop, asking endless questions about hammers and nails and why trees stood tall. He always answered every question like it mattered deeply. I used to think love and home were unbreakable things. I learned much later that they can be chipped away slowly, so slowly you don't notice until pieces are missing. Daniel passed after a long illness. I held his hand every night, and he held mine as long as he still had strength. When he took his last breath, I felt something in the world go quiet. A silence that was not peace, but absence. The house after that felt too large. The rooms echoed differently. I tried to keep myself busy, sweeping floors, tending the garden, baking the same recipes I used to make for the three of us. But tasks don't replace voices. Elaine, it is strange how quickly a tone can change. One morning, I was pouring tea into 3 cups, the way I always did. One for myself, one for Elaine, one for Andrew. A small ritual. A sign of care. Something I believed mattered. Elaine came into the kitchen, but she didn't sit. She stood with her arms crossed, as if she were preparing for a confrontation I didn't yet know I was in. Andrew walked in behind her, silent, observant, like a shadow that knew its presence was enough to make a room feel tight. I smiled softly and said, "Good morning, love." Elaine didn't smile back. "We need space," she said, just like that. No greeting. No lead-in. "You're always around. Always watching. Always listening." The words struck harder than if she had slapped me. I had no idea I had become something to be endured. I tried to answer gently. "This is my home, dear. I'm just living here. With you." She sighed, sharp and frustrated. "Yes. But can't you go out more? Join a group? Visit friends? You're here all the time." It was like listening to a stranger wearing my daughter's voice. I steadied myself. "This house is where my life is. Where your father and I." She cut me off. "Dad is gone." Not said in grief. Said like a door slamming shut. I felt something in my chest twist. I swallowed it. Andrew just leaned back in his chair, watching, waiting, enjoying. That was the first time I noticed the enjoyment. Not in the situation, but in my pain. He didn't need to speak to make himself heard. Elaine had already begun to speak for him. In the weeks that followed, the house shifted from home to territory. Conversations became clipped. Meals were eaten separately. Doors closed more loudly. The laughter that once lived in the halls was replaced with whispers behind doors. When I entered a room, they went silent. Not embarrassed. Dismissive. I began to feel like a ghost haunting my own life. The hurt sat inside me, not dramatic, not loud, just steady. A weight I carried from morning until night. Memory became my companion. The memory of my husband's hand steady on mine. The sound of Elaine's childhood giggles. The warmth of a family that once felt unbreakable. Now I could feel the break. Every day it deepened. The dinner that showed me who my daughter had become. One evening, I made dinner: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans prepared the way Elaine always used to ask for as a little girl. I set the table with care. With habit. With love. They sat. I sat. And Andrew said, without even tasting anything, "We should stop eating this old-fashioned stuff. It's too heavy. We need healthier meals." I smiled politely. "I can make something lighter tomorrow. But this recipe was your wife's favorite as a child." Elaine didn't soften. She didn't smile at the memory. She looked at me as if I had inconvenienced her. "We're different now," she said, shrugging. "Different. Meaning, you are the past. We are the future. Meaning, step aside." I forced myself to eat, though every bite felt like swallowing grief. After dinner, I went to wash dishes. I heard them laughing softly in the living room. Not laughter shared with me. Laughter shared after I left the room. I understood then. Love can remain in your heart even after you are no longer loved back. I began avoiding conflict. Not because I feared them, but because Then came the day they told me Andrew's father was moving in. Not asked. Told. "We need the space," Elaine said plainly. "Dad's old room works best. The garage has plenty of space for your things." I stared at her. Elaine. My daughter. My child whom I held in my arms while she cried after her first heartbreak. My child whose hair I braided and whose room I painted yellow because she said yellow felt like sunshine. She looked at me now like a problem. I said very softly, "My things." Andrew jumped in. "Well, your old stuff. The things that don't matter. The things that don't matter. My wedding dress. My husband's letters. The blanket my mother knitted before her hands grew too weak. Family photographs. 40 years of memory. Things that don't matter." It felt like grief had a second life. I felt the air go hollow in my lungs. I did not shout. I did not cry. I simply said, "You should have asked." Andrew smirked. "We live here too. Stop acting like you own the place." That was when the last thread snapped. It didn't snap loudly. It didn't shatter me. It simply broke cleanly, like a rope finally ending a long, unbearable tension. I looked him in the eyes and said, "I do own the place." He laughed. Loud. Cruel. Confident. "You won't forever. It's going to be ours anyway. Might as well start living like it." And my daughter. She didn't defend me. She didn't object. She didn't even look ashamed. She just looked away. That was the moment I realized. I was losing a daughter. But I would not lose myself. The night in the garage. When they moved my belongings into the garage, the concrete floor was cold. Oil-stained. Dusty. My clothes lay piled like trash bags waiting for disposal. I sat beside them for a long time. I touched the lid of the wooden box that held my husband's letters. I whispered to him, though I knew he could not answer. "They have forgotten who I am. But I haven't." I cried then. Not because I was broken. but because love deserved to be mourned when it died. Then I stood up, and I began to plan. I did not storm back into the house that night. I did not confront. I did not accuse. Anger is fast. But justice, real justice, is slow, patient, and precise. I went to my room, a room that did not feel like mine anymore, and closed the door gently. I sat at the edge of the bed and allowed myself to feel everything. The betrayal. The humiliation. The loneliness. Not to drown in it, but to understand it. To let it settle into something solid inside me. Grief can either hollow you out, or forge you. That night, something in me hardened. Not bitter but clear. They believed I was weak. They mistook my gentleness for helplessness, my silence for surrender. But they had forgotten who I was before I was a mother-in-law, before I was a widow, before the lines of time softened my voice. I had built a life from nothing. I had worked 2 jobs while raising a child. I had stood through storms they didn't even know existed. And they thought I would simply disappear into the garage. They were wrong. The next morning, I called someone I had not spoken to in years. My husband's attorney, Mr. Whitaker. He greeted me with warmth and concern. "It's been a long time. Are you all right?" I answered honestly, "Not yet. But I will be." We met at his office 2 days later. A quiet place, filled with old leather chairs and the smell of paper and dust. Smells that reminded me of my husband's study. I told him everything. Not dramatically. Not bitterly. Just the truth. He listened with the kind of patience that only comes from someone who has seen many human disappointments and many triumphs too. Then he reached into an old filing cabinet and pulled out a folder with my husband's name written across the front. He opened it. He read a few lines. And then he looked at me. "You know," he said slowly, "the house is entirely in your name." I nodded. "And the inheritance terms your husband wrote, very specifically, state that the house cannot be transferred or willed to anyone without your signed and notarized consent." "Yes," I said. "I remember." "And your daughter doesn't know?" "No. We never told her. She was still young. And later, life got busy. Then Daniel passed." He leaned back and exhaled. "Then you still have full authority. Whatever happens next, it is in your hands." I felt something settle inside me. Not revenge. Power. Steady and silent. I signed the documents that affirmed what was already mine. Nothing more. No dramatic gestures. Just the quiet claiming of what always belonged to me. I didn't act immediately. I let days pass. I cooked. I walked softly through the house. I smiled small, polite smiles. Elaine and Andrew mistook the calm for defeat. They became emboldened. They began making renovation plans. Talking about colors. Furniture to replace. Walls to tear down. They spoke of the house like it was already theirs. I listened. I memorized every careless word. One evening, I heard Andrew joking on the phone to a friend. "She's basically just furniture. Old furniture. Hard to get rid of, but eventually it'll happen." Furniture. It should have shattered me. But instead, it confirmed something deeply and quietly. There was no saving the relationship I once had with my daughter. There was no returning to who we used to be. The love was real. But it belonged to a past version of her. And I needed to protect the version of me that remained. 2 weeks later, the doorbell rang. Andrew opened it, expecting a package. Instead, a professional process server handed him a sealed envelope. His eyebrows raised. "What's this?" "For you and Mrs. Elaine Carter." Not Mrs. anything to me. Not family. Not daughter. Just a name on paper. He tore it open. I stood in the doorway and watched the change in his face, smugness melting into confusion, confusion into shock, shock into anger. These are eviction papers. Elaine came running down the stairs. What? Eviction? I spoke gently. Yes. You can't evict us, she snapped. This is my home. No, I said. It is my home. Legally. Entirely. And you have been living here as guests. Guests who have made it clear they no longer want me here. Andrew tried to bluster. This is ridiculous. I'll fight it. You can't, I answered calmly. The house is not in your name. It is not in Elaine's name. It is not willed to either of you. The deed is mine. The trust is mine. The lawyer is mine. Elaine's face turned pale. She understood before he did. Mom, she whispered. You can't do this. We have nowhere to go. I looked at her then, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with the grief of a mother who has finally acknowledged the truth. You had a home. You had love. You had safety. And you threw it away. She opened her mouth, searching for something to say. But there are some moments where there are no words big enough to fill the silence. You have 30 days, I said softly. Use them well. Then I walked past them into the kitchen. And for the first time in months, I poured myself tea. In my home. In my quiet. And I sat in peace. The 30 days that followed were quiet. Not peaceful. Not hostile. Just quiet. Elaine moved through the house like someone walking through a memory she no longer recognized. Sometimes I would catch her standing in the hallway, looking at the pictures on the wall. Pictures of birthdays, vacations, laughter, family. Her fingers would hover near the frames. But she would not touch them. She didn't know whether she still had the right. Andrew, meanwhile, was a storm trying to find something to destroy. He slammed doors, complained loudly to friends, cursed under his breath when he walked past me. But anger that has no power behind it is just noise. I didn't respond. I didn't react. Silence is its own kind of strength. And sometimes, it is the strongest answer of all. The house was dim. Most of their belongings were packed. Cardboard boxes stacked in the hallway where toy blocks once sat. I was sitting in the living room, reading. Or at least looking at the pages. Elaine came in quietly and sat across from me. Not close. Not far. Just near enough. She stared at her hands for a long time before she spoke. Do you hate me? I closed the book. Slowly. Carefully. No, I said. I don't hate you. Her voice cracked. But you're making us leave. I nodded. Yes. She blinked. Confused. How can both be true? Because love does not mean accepting disrespect. Because I raised you to be better than what you became in this house. Because I loved you enough to hope for you, and now I love myself enough to stop being hurt by you. Her breath trembled, and for a moment she looked like the little girl who used to run to me when thunder scared her. But the moment passed. People are not frozen in time. Love does not rewind itself on command. She asked very softly, "Can we ever fix this?" I took a long breath. The truth, even when gentle, still has weight. That depends on the choices you make when you're no longer angry. When life is quiet again. When excuses aren't louder than reflection. When you remember who you were. She nodded slowly. She understood. But understanding is not the same as healing. Healing will take time. Sometimes years. Sometimes a lifetime. They packed the car early in the morning. Andrew made no eye contact. His jaw was tight. His pride wounded. He believed I had taken something from him. But I had not taken a thing. He had simply assumed ownership over something that was never his. That was the beginning and end of the story. Elaine approached me before getting into the car. Her eyes were swollen from crying she didn't want Andrew to see. "I will call you," she whispered. I nodded. "I hope you do." She hesitated, looked back at the house, looked back at me. "I'm sorry. There are apologies that are spoken to relieve guilt. And there are apologies spoken because the truth finally found its way through denial. This was the second kind." I touched her cheek, gently. "I know." She closed her eyes for a moment, like she didn't want the touch to end. Then she got into the car. The engine started. The car rolled away. And the house exhaled, slowly, like it had been holding its breath. Sunlight filled the house differently. Not brighter, not louder, just honest. No tension under doors. No footsteps to brace for. No voices behind walls. I walked room to room, not to inspect, but to feel. The living room felt warmer than it had in months. The hallway no longer echoed their impatience. The kitchen smelled like morning again. I made a single cup of tea. I sat by the window. I let the silence settle, not as loneliness, but as peace. Grief was still there. Of course it was. The grief of losing the daughter I once had. The grief of understanding that love changes shape, sometimes painfully. But peace was there too. And peace is heavier than grief. It wins, eventually. Months later, Elaine did call. Not immediately. Not often. But slowly, carefully, like someone trying to re-enter a room without breaking the doorframe. She apologized again. Truly. Not for what happened. She couldn't change that. But for who she had become in that house, under that influence. Andrew did not join those calls. They separated eventually. Some lessons come late. Some lessons come and rearrange a life. Elaine is rebuilding herself. Not to return to who she was, but to become someone better than who she became. We speak now. With slow understanding. With boundaries. With patience. Love did not disappear. It simply needed to grow roots again. Quiet people are not weak. Kindness is not surrender. Patience is not permission. And dignity is not something that anyone can take away, unless you hand it to them. I forgot that once. But I remember now. And I will not forget again. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have done the same? Or something different? Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and join us again for more stories of strength, healing, and justice quietly served.